Welcome to the last event of this cohort. We'll be doing a cook night led by Dennis. I'll shortly pass the mic to him. So he will be doing a live demo. Some of you can cook along with him and some of you can feel free to just watch. He'll make it very entertaining regardless. And afterwards, after the cooking, which will last about an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and then there will be some Q&A with our star chef. And then afterwards, we will have another chance to have some conversations, and I have some conversation topics in the Notion doc that I had on the calendar and also shared here in the chat. Some questions since we're approaching the holidays and end of the year, so that we can together reflect the year. Any questions or comments before we start?
What type of food are we cooking?
I think that's a great natural transition, Coco. Are you okay if I just jump in right now?
Go ahead.
Cool. Okay, who asked that question? Excuse me. That was Olivia, right? Hi, Olivia. Hi, everybody. So the kind of food we're cooking today, it's inspired by some of the meals that I ate often growing up. I'm half Filipino and half German. And I remember as a kid, I would fly to Germany and we would eat all of these things specifically together. But the reason I'm teaching y'all what I'm cooking is because we'll be able to pull some techniques away from these 3 recipes. The goal isn't to just follow the recipes blankly, it's to sort of recognize what really is the bigger concept going on here in the cooking. So I'm curious, can I get a raise of hands? Who's cooking along today? I think 1 person. Okay, awesome, great. At least 1, 2, oh great, 2 people. So we are going to be cooking 3 different things. The main course of tonight is chicken with white wine, mustard sauce, and chicken broth. So it'll be a chicken with gravy, but the white wine and the broth simmer down, really sort of intensify the flavor. It's a technique called braising. And you have probably had a braised dish before in your life. Braising basically means applying 2 different heat techniques to a protein. So there's a dry heat component, which you're gonna be cooking in the pan. So I have 2 cameras right now. I'm turning my second camera. This is the skillet view, bam. That's the cutting board view, bam. And if you're cooking along, the first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna turn your stove on and put your pan down. So we're just gonna start heating our pan. I'm gonna get us started with a couple things, and once we're started, then we'll start some conversation. I just wanna highlight, anybody could turn off their mic or on their microphones at any point in time. Today should be conversational. Imagine as though you're just sitting here in my living room, cooking with me. I do also want to know that I'm actually in an Airbnb right now. So I'm on vacation and I'm not even in my real kitchen. So if you're thinking like, oh, I don't have the tools that are necessary, honestly, like I scrapped together whatever I could find. And today all we're using is a stovetop and a cutting board. So today should be pretty simple, pretty fun. Before we get started, does anybody have any questions? Cool, okay, great.
Questions?
Well, no questions.
No questions, sorry.
So I'm gonna tour y'all around, the tools that we're using today. Skillet, which is heating up right now. Stovetop, I have an electrical stovetop right now. And then going over to the cutting board side, a couple different tools. Tongs, really important, tongs. These are the little grabby thingies. Spoon, smaller spoon. Just get your tools together. We're also gonna use a vegetable peeler, but that'll be later. So I have all of my ingredients right here in front of me, and I'm gonna actually open up the chicken, and we're gonna get started. So you always want to season any protein or really any vegetable before it hits any heat. I'm seasoning this chicken right now. And often a lot of times people ask me, how much salt do I add to a piece of meat, or how much salt do I add to a piece of protein? And at the end of the day, there's not necessarily a specific science to it. Like I can't say like, you're gonna put a tablespoon on each piece. You really develop a feel after a while. And what you're really looking for, I guess for me, I'm doing 2 turns of my salt shaker, but that's gonna be different for every single person. Oftentimes, another thing that you could do to start getting the feel is just pile a little bit of salt on your table or your cutting board, and then just sprinkle that around. And let's see, okay. I don't know if I could get a close up of that chicken. You can't really see the saltiness of it, but really important, just get the surface really covered in salt. Oftentimes, beginner cooks who don't necessarily like know what to do, the first thing that I tell people to say is, or the first thing that I tell people is season your food with salt and pepper. If you can figure out how much salt food needs, then your cooking is just going to taste so much better. So quickly season both sides. And I wish I had a pepper grinder, but today I'm just going to use this because this was in my Airbnb. So salt, pepper, both sides. Okay, I'll wash my hands because they're all chickeny. And the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna brown the chicken. Browning is a technique that's used in, I would say, most cuisines. And it's really, really important to brown your food because it develops a little bit of a different flavor. If I were to just cook my chicken in liquid right now, it would be soft and it would be delicious, but it wouldn't quite have the same flavor as brown chicken would. So I'm gonna, let's see if we could do a dual shot. I'm gonna brown it skin side down. So oops, I almost forgot oil in the pan. I'm just using regular Crisco, pure vegetable oil. You could use olive oil. I like vegetable oil because it has a high heat temperature and it doesn't really smoke as an extra virgin olive oil would. Extra virgin, I tend to use it as a fish oil, so sort of at the end because it has almost a green, unripe quality to it, which is really nice. Okay, we're gonna get some sizzle here. Y'all can still hear me, right? With sizzling chicken going on?
It's perfect. Acoustics are perfect.
What was that?
The audio is perfect.
Okay, awesome. So we're gonna put this chicken in and we're gonna probably sear it for, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes. The goal is to make it brown. The temperature right now is in between medium and high. So I can set my temperature actually. It's at 400, but you would probably do, if you have a gas grill, probably 75% of the flame on your grill. So not all the way hot, but just hot enough to be able to hear the sound. If you put it in and it's silent, it's not hot enough. You have to kind of listen to it. That's the water coming out of the chicken skin, and also part of the browning process. So I'm gonna clean up right here. As the chicken's browning, that's gonna take about 5 minutes. And the next couple of things that I'm gonna do, we are gonna cut some onion. Okay, so I wanna take a moment here to remind ourselves to be safe. We're multitasking and doing a lot of things, especially for cooking along. Be careful, try not to cut your fingers. I'll do my best as well. Just kidding. But a couple things that you want to always make sure you do when you're cutting onions or really anything, never your fingers out like this. When you have your fingers out, that's like setting yourself up for failure, which is not something that we want to do. So So always curl your fingers, kind of like a, I don't know, little bear. Curl your fingers down and take both butts off of the onion. So the root end and the tip, and then we're just gonna cut it in half right now. The peeling onions is actually quite easy. You just need to do both sides, and then it comes off. And our chicken is still going right now. Make sure to not forget about that. It's still sizzling. Mine looks good. Mine smells good. Gonna do the other onion half.
I want to ask a question on behalf of Olivia, which is, do the rules change if we're using fish?
What was that?
Fish. Do the rules change if we're using fish? Or can
No,
this...
you're gonna still sear this fish skin side down.
Okay.
So the skin should touch the oil right now, and you're not gonna flip it until 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay. Awesome.
What kind of fish are you using?
Oh, I'm not cooking, but Olivia is, and she asked a question about fish versus chicken, and I was curious about it. Or
Oh, cool. Yeah. You're gonna make sure you sear it skin side down, and you'll still brown the fish, and you'll still season it in the same way. And the technique is gonna be exactly the same. So yeah, you'll be able to make the same dish with fish or any other protein that you're interested in. But braising, this is the first step of braising, to cook it in dry heat in oil. And then next we're gonna cook it in wet heat, which is the white wine, the broth, and then all of the other flavor components that you wanna cook. It's a really similar dish in many cuisines. Like for example, chicken adobo. I don't know if anybody's ever had that. It's a Filipino dish. Same exact thing. So you're gonna brown the chicken, and then once the chicken's brown, you'll toss in the garlic, you'll toss in the onions, and then you'll toss in all the liquid and cook it down. So that's kind of what I'm saying here. When you learn the techniques of braising, when you learn how brown the protein should look, you could apply it to so many different dishes, which I think is the really exciting part of the cooking. It's all in the foundation. And that's kind of why I'm starting with this dish right here. Because braising is my favorite, you know, it like just reminds me of like comfort food. I genuinely think it's the best way to any protein, because there's so much technique based in it. I mean, like you're cooking like, I don't know, like there's chemical reactions going on in the chicken right now as it's searing, which just like develops as much flavor as possible. And all of the cooking liquids that you add, it's so intentional to add flavor in every part of the process. And that's why I love it. But back to this onion, because I'm just gonna be chatting all night long. So y'all see my onion. There's a lot of different ways that people like to cut an onion up. Sometimes people cut it with just like a little centimeter left, but we're gonna be easy. We're just gonna cut it in strips in one direction. And then when you're done with it, you're just gonna turn it around and cut it in strips in the other direction. So you're just dicing the onion or cutting it into smaller pieces. Oftentimes, right here, I'm not sure, y'all can see this, yeah, right here, this is kind of where I like to just flip it down to make it easier to cut. But that's half of our onion, and I think, yeah, we'll use a full onion today. So just do the same on the other side. And I'll take a little bit longer to introduce myself right now as I'm cooking this. I said a little bit earlier that I learned to cook from my parents. My mom, when we first moved to the States, owned a catering company. And some of my earliest memories growing up were peeling potatoes in her like in the backyard and like trying to make as many potatoes as possible. I remember peeling hundreds of potatoes for her catering company for like mashed potatoes. But I didn't start cooking professionally until after college. I moved to the US Virgin Islands to WOOF. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of that. It's an acronym, Worldwide Organic Farm Federation. But it's basically a nonprofit that connects farmers to volunteers. So I wanted to volunteer in the Virgin Islands for a couple months, and I worked on a banana farm. And it was there that they started asking me to cook for some of the guests that came. And one of the chefs from St. John, a different island, ended up coming to our farm, eating my food, and they invited me to cook at the restaurant, Ocelar on St. John. So I worked there for about a year together, and the foundations that I picked up there were mainly French. It was a French restaurant, and a lot of chefs have their beginnings in French cuisine, like the Culinary Institute of America begins with French foundations, and I thought that was fun, but it didn't necessarily really incorporate my perspective or the foods that I ate from my dad or just growing up. But why I like that experience so much is because you could apply the techniques that you use there, like braising, and apply it to so many other things. So I worked there for a year, and then I worked at an Indonesian restaurant on the same island called Fatty Crab. And I became, I worked on the walk. That was my, that was my station. And I worked there for about a year. And then I decided St. John was a little too far. And I moved back to California. And right now I'm an educator at the Cal Academy of Sciences. I teach STEM, science, to teenagers. But my passion is cooking, and I'm really excited that I'm here with you all tonight. Especially on your last evening of the cohort, I feel really lucky to be here celebrating with you. And hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll have some dishes that you could bring to your future celebration. But I'm gonna change the angle right now. So we're looking at the chicken. I'm gonna move a little way. We're looking at the chicken. It's starting to brown. I think you could see that. There we are. It's starting to brown, but it's not fully brown on both sides. You want this, where are we? This color all over the chicken. So as brown as possible. The more brownness, the more flavor. So we're just gonna keep on going. If you're searing your fish, if you're searing your other things, you could take a look at it, maybe rotate them, which is what I'm doing right now. I think all of the heat is coming from the center of this pan. So I need to make sure that I'm accounting for that. Okay.
I didn't have vegetable oil, so I ended up using something my mom does, which is mustard oil.
Ooh. That's cooking oil that you're using?
Yeah.
Does that have a flavor?
Oh, definitely. It's slightly pungent.
Ooh, cool. And you're using
Dennis,
chicken also?
I'm catching.
Sorry, someone was saying something.
No, go ahead.
Dennis.
Yeah? Oh, okay. I didn't want to interrupt anybody. Okay, I think we're in a good spot right now. I'm gonna make a cocktail. So it's cocktail time. So what we're making tonight is an Aperol Spritz. And typically, this actually isn't even a winter drink. It's a drink that you drink on like a warm day outside. But I figure when I think of the holidays or winter or December in California, I genuinely think of like, I don't know, day drinking. Not day drinking, but spending time with my family outside for lunch. So that's the idea behind this cocktail. A cocktail you could bring to a daytime holiday party. But it's Aperol Spritz, and we are, it only has 4 parts. So I'm not even gonna measure this out today. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do it to taste. So Aperol, it's an aperitif. It's a little bitter, it's a little sweet, but it's a really nice thing to drink before a meal. Aperitif, I guess, is like a cocktail enjoyed before dinner. So I'm not adding too much. I'm just gonna add maybe like this much. That much. And there's only two other liquid ingredients: champagne or Prosecco. I opened it. And then we're gonna add some club soda. So I just added about half of the way up with champagne, and then I'm gonna add my club soda right now. And if they're not cold, I'd suggest putting ice in it. But right now, this is, almost done. The last thing that we want to do.
So Aperol and Prosecco 1:1? Oh.
Yeah. One more time. Prosecco and club soda. So I
Equal
added
parts,
about
all three?
like 10% Aperol, and then I fill the cup up halfway with Prosecco, and then fill the rest with club soda. It's
Got
oil and corn. Also, I just want to note from back here, I can't see the chat, but if there's any questions that do come up, just let me know. I'm recognizing my chickens is getting a little loud here.
David was asking that he was saying that he's a little behind. What's it supposed to be in the pan and which spices?
One more time?
David was asking what's supposed to be in the pan with the chicken and which spices.
Right now, the chicken just has salt and pepper.
Okay.
Yeah, so just salt and pepper. We're gonna add the flavor in a bit. But for searing, we don't really need to add too much for this recipe. There are a lot of different spices that are essential to bring out in the oil with a dry heat. But today, for this dish, we're just doing salt and pepper for the two. Okay. My chicken looks like it's on a spot where I could flip it. Oh yeah. Okay. So here we go. So I think y'all can see that they all really have like a nice brownness to them. There we go. It's consistent all the way around. And it's hard to the touch. Like you could tell that you like crisped it up. The chicken isn't cooked inside right now, but we're gonna get there. Oh my gosh. Cheers, everybody. If you have a cocktail, if you don't, happy Friday. We made it through this entire week. But cheers.
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 Okay. I'm gonna keep on going. Actually, I'm gonna clean up a little bit. Okay. So the next couple things that we're gonna do, I'm gonna go back over here. And we're gonna chop our garlic.
Hey, Dennis. I'm
Yeah.
curious, why is your chicken so yellow? Mine is not. Why is your chicken so yellow?
So yellow?
Did you put any curry?
No, I didn't. So that's literally just the brownness of it.
Oh, okay.
I think it's the lighting from the webcam makes it look yellow.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
But it's not. It's definitely, it can't be yellow.
Should I expect my beef to turn yellow too, or it's a different type of meat?
With a fish?
With beef.
With beef. Oh no. With beef, you could still brown it. Like you're gonna cook it in the same way, but you should still have a high heat in your pan, and you should be able to see it browning. If it's not like kind of sizzling and making like a lot of noises, then the pan probably isn't hot enough. So I would suggest, if you don't hear that, try turning it up a little bit. And make sure that you're keeping an eye on it. Because if it's hot like that, it can potentially burn. But you really want to make sure that you're getting a nice brown on it, because that's going to develop the base of all of these flavors. So yeah, I would be okay with browning it a little bit more than you think. But yeah, okay. I'm going to go back to my garlic. Bam. Okay. Processing garlic, really simple. Just get your knife, kind of smash it. I'm using 4 cloves of garlic today. I forget what the recipe said, but I usually just add as much as I have. I love garlic. It really mellows out when you cook it down like this. So I think it's okay to add a good amount.
And it keeps the vampires away.
Yeah, what's that? Oh,
Sorry, random joke.
Oh, something about vampires. I just got it. Okay, and we just want a rough chop on this garlic. So we're just gonna smash it up a little bit.
My beef is overcooked.
What's overcooked?
My beef is already overcooked. I think it's probably too heated.
Oh no! Wait, can I see it?
Burning.
I believe in you. I think you can salvage it. So what we're gonna do right now, so I'm gonna go back to my chicken. It's quite brown. I'm actually gonna take it off the heat.
Question?
So it's very brown right now. And it's slightly brown on the bottom as well, but you don't need to have it as brown. The skin is the most important to get really nice and brown, because there's also gelatin in chicken and fish skin. And when you cook it in this dry heat, in this oil, you pull out that gelatin and you allow it to marry in the sauce, and then it'll actually make the sauce a little bit thicker. So I pulled the chicken out, actually. I just put it on a plate right here. Okay, so we're just gonna let this sit over here. And we're gonna do a couple other things. So.
Dennis, in terms of the timing, is chicken supposed to take longer than say beef or other fish, or like what would you suggest about how long?
Yeah, good question. So it really depends how thick the protein is. So right now, mine are just chicken thighs. They're large pieces of chicken thighs. If the beef is cut in the same shape and exact size, it should take the same amount of time with this technique, with braising. Fish, same exact thing. If you have it in the same shape and size as these thighs, it'll take about 30 minutes. But if you have smaller pieces than this, it might take a little bit less than that. But it really depends on the size of your protein. So mine, I would say like 2 decks of cards stacked on top of each other. That takes about 30 minutes. But the nice thing about this recipe is generally, since it's a slow cook in the liquid, it's almost hard to overcook it because it just gets more tender as you go along. So whether you cook it for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour, this dish is kind of hard to screw up, which it's kind of like a wow dish without like a lot of like fuss. But yeah, I don't know if that necessarily answers your question specifically, but if you show me the piece of protein you're using, I'll gladly tell you how long it'll cook. With these things also, I'll show you how to just take a look at the like chicken or fish or the beef on the inside. And generally at the very end, you could cut it in half and see if it's done or not, based on whether or not it's still pink in the middle. Or fish, fish would be a little bit white and squishy, like almost translucent if it's undercooked. But there's not really any silver bullet.
David asked a question, bones increase cooking time. Is that correct? Do bones increase cooking time?
Yeah, so right now I have bone-in thighs, and they'll cook for about 30 minutes. If I had boneless thighs, it'd probably be done in 20 minutes, but in 30 minutes it would still taste good. Okay, can y'all still see my other screen? I'm sauteing onions right now. I think the other close-up.
Yep, I can see it. It looks good.
Okay.
I can see the sauteing.
Okay, great. Well, I tossed the onions in the pan right now. And what I'm doing is scraping the bottom of the pan right after I took the chicken out. There's kind of this brown stuff at the bottom. That's called fond. But that is going to be the base of the flavor for this sauce right here. So it kind of looks like almost like just the brownness that stuck to the pan. But that's going to be really important in developing these flavors. So do a good job of like trying to scrape that off if you can. I kind of have like a hardish spatula. And all of these pieces are kind of getting tossed into the onions. Right now I'm gonna heat it up to high. Just keep an eye on it. But I wanna saute these onions just until they're translucent or see-through, and then I'm gonna add the garlic. Okay. So yeah. Oh, I'm gonna have a little bit more cocktail. Okay, so at this point, what's the next thing that I'm gonna do? I think, actually, if you take a look at these onions right here, they're already translucent. So if you were in my room with me, you'd be able to smell that the aromatics are really coming out at this point. And it like, I love the smell of onions. It makes everything taste so much better. But now that they're see-through, I'm gonna add the garlic. Just like that. There we go. And we're just gonna cook this for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. Immediately, you're kind of just like slapped with a wave of garlic smell. You smell that? Also, everybody, I'm not sure. Meet Brad. Can you see him? He's my sous chef for the day. Okay. Still working on those camera angles. Okay, so our onions and garlic are good. And what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna add some salt to the pan. And thyme. So thyme is this tiny little herb right here. I find it tastes so good, and it really, it blends really well with the other flavors going on this dish. The main flavors that you're gonna taste are white wine, whole grain mustard, and thyme. And they just marry together so well. But if you were making a different dish, let's say if you're making chicken adobo, you wouldn't be adding this. You would be adding bay leaves and black pepper. If you're making, I don't know, ropa vieja, which is a braised beef dish from Cuba, it has, it's braised skirt steak, and you would like brown the beef at the very beginning, And then you would take the beef out, and then you would add garlic, and then tomatoes, and beef broth. So it's all like cook the protein, take the protein out, saute the aromatics, which are onions and garlic, and then just cook it in the liquid. So it's getting there. It's starting to smell really nice. I'm gonna add whole grain mustard to the jar, or to the dish. And I'm gonna add about 1 tablespoon. So I think you can see that right here. And
Oh wow, I
yeah?
completely misunderstood what whole grain mustard was.
Oh yeah, show me what you got.
Yeah, this guy.
Oh, those are still mustard seeds. You could toss those in as well. I would toss in the same amount.
Okay.
This mustard is, I mean, it's basically exactly the same thing, but this is cooked in like a vinegar. So like whole grain mustard is basically just that, but cooked so it comes together. And then some of it is ground. So oftentimes like the yellow mustard that you get is this, that's ground into a powder, and they like add like vinegar and like a bunch of other things nowadays. But traditional whole grain mustard is just mustard seed and vinegar. And the nice thing about this dish is it'll probably taste the same if you add those mustard seeds, because we're adding some acid from the white wine that's coming into this dish. So in the end, in the long run, it'll still have the same flavor. It smells so good. It smells good, right? So good. And I went too quick. I didn't tell you how much time I put. I just, I feel like there's no way to add too much of this stuff. You could just add a whole bunch. If you have a whole pack, you could add a whole pack, but I'm just adding like 5 or 6 stems just so it kind of really, I don't know, brings a flavor blast into this. But that's gonna build a little bit more flavors. All of these things right now are flavoring the oil that's cooking in there. And not only is there the vegetable oil that I added at the beginning, but there's also oil from the chicken that came out. The chicken fat kind of like renders a little bit, and you have like a really amazing kind of like umami rich fat that is then flavored by your onions, and then flavored by your garlic, and then flavored by your mustard and your thyme, and it really flavors that oil, which as like a little bit of science, oil obviously rises to the top of anything. Like if you mix water and oil rises. When you spoon any sort of liquid, any food that has oil in it, the first thing that's going to touch your lips, or the first thing that's going to touch your tongue, is the oil. So whatever oil you're using, that's like going to be the first flavor that you really taste. And I brought up finishing oils before, like when you put olive oil on the end on like some roasted vegetables, you're going to taste that oil. And what we're doing right here is we're doing everything we can to bring flavor into that oil. So when we have a final dish, not only is it a flavorful cooking liquid, but it's also extremely flavorful cooking oil. And some of these things, like thyme, for example, garlic, onions, you can't extract that flavor if you were just to cook it in a wet heat. So if you're just to boil onions, it's not anything near like the same as grilled onions. Obviously, like nobody puts boiled onions on a burger, but people like put the hell out of grilled onions on everything, and that's because of the flavors that it brings out. So, my temperature is almost too high. I'm starting to see it stick to the bottom right now, and when you see that, you're gonna want to add your liquids. So this is white wine. It's nothing fancy. It was just the cheap white wine at Whole Foods, $5. So it doesn't have to be special. Yeah. Barefoot, there we go, that's great. Just nothing sweet. Like if it's a Moscato or like something sweet, that'll change the flavor. So I'm gonna add about like, a good amount. I added maybe 25% of the bottle. So I toss that in right now. And that's going. And you're gonna want to boil this. So it smells quite nice actually. And the original recipe that I gave y'all asked for a tablespoon of flour. I decided to omit that today. You could make a thicker gravy if you add just a little bit of flour right before you add the white wine, before you deglaze the pan. But today I kind of just want a pan sauce without any of that flour. So I kind of want to just let it cook by itself without adding any of that. And if you don't use flour, you're also, it's easier, or if you add flour, it's a little easier to burn. So by omitting it, we're just kind of like helping ourselves make it a little bit easier. So this is cooking right now, and we are going to add back 2 things. Okay, so we're gonna bring the chicken back into the mix. And I'm just gonna place them in here. So gently. Quite beautiful. The chicken like let a little bit of juice loose on my plate, so I just dump that right in over here. And then the last thing that I'm gonna do is I have some chicken broth. You could get canned chicken broth, but I actually made some earlier just by boiling chicken bones for like a couple hours as I was doing my work from home. But we're gonna add, I'm not gonna measure it out, but I'm gonna probably add about 1/2 cup to a full cup. But what you want is you want to almost cover your chicken. So I'm adding it in the pot. Not almost cover it, but just have maybe just the skin poking out right like that. And I'm just gonna put it on high temperature. And regardless of what meat you cook, this is just gonna sit for 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how soft you want it. But after 30 minutes, it should be done. And we're just gonna let that sit. So this is the second, this is the second cooking method that we're using today. It's the wet cooking method. So dry heat was at the beginning to flavor those oils. Now we're bringing in a lot of different flavors. So the wet broth and the white wine will kind of marry together and like reduce down into like a really nice sauce. What we're gonna go for is we want to reduce it down, I would say about 50%. So what we see right here, the liquid should go down by half by the end of it. I think you could see that. But 2 little chickens poking out just like that. And I'm gonna give myself just a quick minute to clean up. And I would serve this today. I'm not making a side dish for this protein. I would serve this either with rice or noodles or like any starch or potatoes. But this dish, I really envisioned it to be a dish that you could kind of like let sit for a long time. It's genuinely like better the next day. So it's kind of something nice that you could prepare and then bring to a holiday gathering or some sort of gathering because it heats up really well. Unlike, I don't know, dairy or a lot of other dishes, like it's tough they don't really travel well. This dish is one dish that travels super well, and it's nice. It's really easy to make, and it's generally like a wow factor, or has high wow factor. But that's just gonna sit for, like I said, 30 minutes. What time is it right now? 6:56. And I'm gonna get started on my next dish. Before I do, how's everyone doing? Does anyone have any questions?
What's your favorite oil to use?
What's my favorite oil to use? I mean, it really depends. When I'm cooking for myself, I like coconut oil because it's really versatile. Like it has a really high smoke point, so I could cook it in a lot of other things. But I also really like the flavor. If we're talking about, I don't know, cooking things like this, I don't think it's necessarily all that bad to use like a canola oil or a vegetable oil. I think ideal in this situation might be avocado oil. It also has a nice high smoke point, but it depends what dish you're trying to make. I would say anything that has like a mild flavor in this situation, because you're bringing in a lot of other flavors.
So you would avoid olive oil?
You know, not necessarily. There's generally in stores you see two kinds. You see extra virgin olive oil and extra light olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil shouldn't necessarily be cooked. A lot of people use that as like a cooking oil, and it won't necessarily taste bad in the long run. But like olive oil, like you lose a lot of its nuances when you cook it, and it almost turns a little bitter for me. So I wouldn't use an extra virgin. I would suggest an extra light if you have one. But like any lighter cooking oil would be best for today's purpose. Okay. So, oh, cool. I see David.
What about butter? In terms of
butter is a good oil. It's super flavorful. I would use that in here. It doesn't have a crazy high, or it doesn't have a crazy high smoke point. So sometimes it browns really quickly and early. But also browned butter like is really nice. It like is a different flavor. I'm adding a little bit of salt right now. And I'm gonna add, I'm just gonna add a small amount, enough to flavor or season the liquid. And I'm gonna add less than I think I need. So, because when it's, I would say maybe in 15 minutes when I could taste it, I'll add salt to taste and just kind of get there. But right now it has all of the main ingredients inside of it. And we are going to move on to our next dish. So if you're cooking at home, I would suggest making like some sort of starch with this. Maybe like toss like some rice on the stove or put it in your rice cooker. But I wanted to save time for our next thing, which is our dessert. I'm gonna clean this up. So this dessert that we're making, it's called Apfel Kuechel, which means apple pancakes. So it's a super simple dessert also to make. And I really like it. There's only a couple ingredients. And I sent y'all the list of ingredients. I didn't send you the measurements, but I'll go over that today. It's really easy. It's just 1 cup flour, half a cup milk, half a cup water, and 1 egg. So once again, that's 1 cup flour, half a cup water, half a cup milk, and 1 egg. So that's the batter that we're about to make. So if you are in a place where you could start preparing the dessert, I would start pulling those out and maybe measuring those together. Nothing special, we're just gonna mix it. It doesn't matter what order you toss them in. Sorry for the loud beeping noises. Oh. Okay, so I'm setting my second pan on. It's gonna be medium to low, but I'm just gonna set that there so it could start warming up as we mix these other ingredients up. So these are apple pancakes, and I'm gonna start with the apples. So, okay. Playing with my second camera here, I think. There we go. Okay, so here's my apple. I'm just gonna peel it, and I don't know why, but every time I peel an apple, I like challenge myself to see if I could peel it all in one go. Like, see if I lost. I was trying to keep all the peel together, but what we're doing is we're just taking the entire peel off of the apple. So it looks nice and clean. There we go. Oh, there's our apple. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut it in discs, and then we're gonna hollow out the center. So the size of these discs, here, I'll cut my first one and show you. I would say this is about like, I don't know, 1/2 centimeter, or maybe like 3/4 stacked on top of each other. So you're just gonna get your apple, peel it, and then cut it into these discs right here. So once you have those ready, we're just gonna go all the way down. Keep on making those. Okay, so I have my discs. I'm gonna get a paring knife, so a tiny little knife like this. And typically, this isn't really the normal way of making it. There's a tool called an apple corer, which you could use at the beginning before you cut your apple into discs to take the core out. But I don't have one because I'm in an Airbnb. So I'm just gonna poke a little hexagon inside of my apple to take the center out. So tiny little hexagon, and then you see this cute little ring shape. So just like that. And I'm gonna do that with every single piece of my apple. All the way down till you have the full thing. And so this dish right here, this is a holiday dish that my mom used to make all the time. And it's really simple. It just has a couple ingredients, but it definitely reminds me of the holidays. And it's also another thing that you could, that travels well. You could take this to many different places, and it's really just apples. If you are dairy-free or vegan, you could choose to use nut milk. And you could also use, as a replacement for eggs, applesauce, like, because you're making apple pancakes. That works really well. But, okay, I'm almost done with my apple. So I have all of my rings cut out, just like that. And I'm gonna mix my ingredients. So like I said earlier, 1 cup of flour, which measure out 1 cup of flour. And I'm not all that precise. Whenever I make this, usually I just go by feel, but you just kind of want like a thick batter. And you'll see what I mean by that. But if you follow this recipe, it should give you the texture and consistency that you want. So here is the second ingredient. So 1/2 cup of milk. Oops. 1/2 cup of water. And 1 egg. Right over here. And if you're still cooking, take a look at the braise right here. So it's still just cooking down. It smells really nice, but it hasn't quite reduced. We want it to reduce, like I said, halfway till the sauce gets thicker. And you'll notice it turning into a sauce and less of like broth. And when that's done, you'll know it's done. Generally 30 minutes is usually what it takes, but I prefer to not necessarily cook by like looking at them, but I have a feel for how things should look and how things should taste. And I think that's really the secret of learning how to cook. It's not necessarily following recipes. It's noticing things. If you become more aware in your cooking, if you listen to your food, how it sounds, how it looks, like the textures of things, you'll be able to remember these much better than you will remember like ratios or numbers of like, I don't know, things to add. So oftentimes I kind of like to just cook by feel. So this is mixing up. It's quite a thick batter. But after a couple mixes, it looks kind of smooth, and it kind of has like a goopy, goopy texture. I don't know how like, I'm not quite sure how to describe viscosity. I don't really have any adjectives for something like this, but maybe like almost like melted chocolate. Like you could kind of, I don't know, goopy. But I'll put this away. And I'm actually gonna switch my two dishes. So this is a little closer to me. And these ones are gonna be really simple. My pan is now warm and I'm gonna add some butter. So we're gonna, this time around, we're gonna cook with butter. And like I said, it's a low to medium heat that we're using. And I'm just gonna switch this over.
How do you decide when to use butter and when to use oil?
So butter, for me, it's all about the smoke point. Right now, because I'm cooking this on a low to medium heat, butter is the ideal fat to use. If I were to cook butter on high, it would turn brown and almost black. So right now, this is like a really good fat to use. That being said, if you were to use oil, it would just have a slightly different flavor. This batter really does kind of like absorb some of the fat. So the flavor of it is really quite important. If you were to use an oil you don't really like, or an oil that doesn't necessarily have much flavor, you're gonna get that like as like the first flavor that you taste. So for something like this, where there's like such few ingredients and the final product really does absorb a lot of that flavor, butter is the way to go. Yeah, but really, Coco, it's all about the smoke point. That's just, it's one thing you just like always think about, like depending on what you're cooking, depending on how hot you're cooking it, is really going to be like the main like directions, like in terms of like how or what type of oil you want to use. But oftentimes really the only oils I use in my kitchen are coconut oil, olive oil, butter, and canola oil, or vegetable oil. But those are the four. And like I said, olive oil, I always use that for finishing dishes. So finishing salads, like finishing like, and by finishing, I mean just putting a little bit on at the very end to add flavor. Okay, so our final part of the evening, as these dishes are cooking down, I'm gonna add a glove onto my hand, just because it's a little messy. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna coat I'm coating the apples in just a little bit of flour. So just cover them in flour, and then I'm just gonna drop them in here. You could also, if you don't have gloves, you could use just forks or a fork and spoon, but I kind of like the control that I get from this glove. So we're just gonna cover them all in flour and then dip them in the batter. And then after these cook up, we're gonna cover them in cinnamon sugar. So they're kind of like cookies, but they have kind of a nice crisp outside to them. They taste really delicious. And then the inside, the apples, they cook down and they get kind of applesaucey. They get very soft and delicious. So you could see them softening up as you cook, but we'll finish this up. Okay.
What's
Dennis?
the reason?
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to repeat Alvin's question because I've always wondered that as well about using salted butter versus non-salted butter.
I only use unsalted butter. And the reason is if I have, if I have salted butter, then I'm not really in control of how much salt I'm putting into a final dish. If I use unsalted butter, I could always add more salt. So I would suggest for almost everything, unless you're just using it for jam on toast or like putting it on bread, I would suggest unsalted butter for anything cooking. If you're using it just for like for breakfast or like just on toast, salted butter is okay. But yeah, I'm happy to get more control out of it. This last one didn't get enough batter, so I'm just adding a little bit more. But yeah, do y'all use salted butter or unsalted butter?
Well, now I'm going to use unsalted. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all about like how much control you have in a situation. And a chefs always have control issues. But generally, like it's just you know a little bit more, especially for desserts. Like you don't want to necessarily like have that much salt. Like a little bit of salt in desserts is actually really nice. But you want to have the choice to be able to put it. So this is my favorite part of wearing gloves. When I get messy, I just take them off and now I'm clean. So these apple pancakes, these Apfel Kuechel, are just gonna sit in this pan for about 4 minutes on each side, and then we're gonna cover them in some cinnamon sugar. So we'll make that right now.
Why did you wrap the apples in flour before you dip it in the mixture? Like, what's the reason behind those steps?
So it's kind of like onion rings. When you make onion rings, if you're just to dip them in the batter, the outside of it would completely fall off of the final product. So in this situation, if you were to not dip it in the flour, the batter at the very end would kind of just peel off. Dipping it in the dry flour before I fry it, or before I dip it in the batter, it kind of glues the apple to the actual batter on the outside. So in the end, you'll have, when you take a bite, rather than having the two separate things come out, you'll be able to have a much more seamless final product. But these are also these are very easy to tell when they're done. You should be able to just immediately move them around, but you're allowed to check them. And we want brownness on these as well. So right now, I still hear them cooking a little bit more. When they're completely silent, if you don't hear any simmering anymore, then they should be generally ready to flip. We're almost done with everything. And let's take a look at the chicken. The chicken's looking good. It's getting there. I might get a spoon. Every once in a while, I like to baste the chicken. So just kind of like get the sauces and like toss it right on top. But by looking at this, I feel like it maybe needs probably like 10 more minutes or so before it reduces down. But yeah, it's looking better. And at this point, the chicken should be at a place where you could taste it, or the sauce should be at a place where you could taste it, harming yourself from salmonella. And from here, you should be able to figure out whether or not you need to add more salt or let it be. And right now, it could use a little bit more salt, but I'm gonna wait because it's gonna continue to reduce. And the more it reduces, the saltier the final liquid is gonna be. So I think in the very end, this is gonna be perfect. But yeah, okay. Back to over here. We only have a couple more things and then we're done. So cinnamon sugar, super easy, cinnamon and sugar. You're just gonna mix them together till you get, I don't know, you get the color that you want. I would say just like that, and then mix it up. And it kind of just like becomes a sandy color. But this is the final thing. And then once the apples are completely done, you're just gonna toss them in the cinnamon sugar over here. Okay, I think the apples are ready to flip. Take a look at these. Yeah. So a little bit of browning on these apples. And you could hear, immediately when I flip them, they just start singing. And you're just gonna cook them until you don't hear that anymore. So these are basically just like apples, or apple pancakes. You could, they're not necessarily just a dessert. Like oftentimes, like during the holidays, it's a nice like holiday breakfast to make, or like a nice little holiday brunch. But we're gonna let this cook for maybe 3 more minutes on this side, and then we're completely done with the day. I think like, yeah, those are the majority of things that we're gonna cook. We're just gonna let this wait for a little bit. I'll finish the apple pancakes, but I will, I'll maybe take a moment to pause right here. Those of us that are cooking, how are y'all doing? Can we hear some updates on your end?
My chicken is bubbling away over there.
Cool.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, I think the nice thing about braising is like once it's boiling away, like you don't really have to do anything. And that's why I started immediately just making this. It's a lot of work up front, but once it's here, you could just let it go. And one thing that I do want to note, if I were in my full kitchen, what I would probably do is I would cook this in the oven. And the reason that is, and not fully cook it in the oven, but I would do once it's all in the liquid, I would put this entire pan just straight up in the oven, because you get heat from both directions. So right now you can see the chicken, it's searing away or it's simmering away. The heat's coming from the bottom right now. If it were in the oven, obviously it would be coming from all directions. You would continue to brown the top of your chicken as you're cooking it in the sauce. So it would just develop more flavors. I don't think either is like, this isn't bad. This is like very easy and simple and straightforward to cook. But I suggest maybe the next time you'll try it, maybe put the pot or the pan in the oven if you have an oven safe pan.
And would you do that at like 250 or 212 or like what? Low temperature?
I would probably do it at 400 degrees.
400 degrees.
Yeah, a really high temperature. And the reason that is because you're still cooking in the liquid. So no matter how hot the outside is, like the water is never gonna get above 100 Celsius. Like it's never gonna get above like boiling point. So it's gonna it's gonna stay at a certain temperature, and you want to bring it to a really high temp to brown it and then cook it down. So yeah, I would suggest anywhere in between 350 and 400 degrees. And you could, if you see it already starting to over brown, like if it's in the oven, you could either put a lid on it or put some tin foil on top of that. But it does create like a slightly different flavor. You kind of get more like brown crispy bits at the very end, which like brown crispy bits, like those are always delicious.
Dennis, if you wanted to add more vegetables to the dish, like carrots, celery, would you put those in near the end, or when would you add those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would, at this point, I would probably add them maybe when there's like 15 minutes left of cooking in the liquid. So if you have celery, if you have mushrooms would be really nice in here. Maybe some baby carrots, maybe some tiny little potatoes, maybe even some greens. If you have greens, I would just toss those in at the very end. But however long you would cook them in like any other liquid is how long you would sleeve them in here. Alternatively, you could also finish it till it's completely done. And like at the very end, you could toss in like your vegetables if you chop them up really tiny and just cook them in the sauce. But yeah, I would add them maybe 15 minutes before you're done, depending on how large you cut them.
Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like these apple pancakes, these Apfel Kuechel, are almost done. I'm gonna get a plate ready for them. And then we'll be done for the day. Okay. So I'll hold my camera. Okay, we see the pancakes, we see my cinnamon sugar. This is kind of the last part. So you see they're nice and brown. Immediately from the pan, we're gonna toss them in the cinnamon sugar. So it's sort of like churros, like they kind of just like taste exactly like that. And they're just apple, batter, and cinnamon sugar. And they are so good. So I'm gonna do all of these apple pancakes, just toss them in my cinnamon sugar. And then we'll be done. But let's make a cup, let's finish this all.
Olivia, are you talking to us or to yourself?
Sorry, what was that?
I know Olivia's talking, but she's muted, so I gather maybe she's not talking to us.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Oh, I was asking Dennis, do you ever mail those whatever you cook out? Can people buy what you cook?
Ooh, you know, to be perfectly honest, I haven't started anything like that. Is that something you might be interested in?
What's your address? We'll be over.
Oh, in the Slack channel later, I'll add some like contact information. But y'all have my contact information from Slack. I was just telling Coco before this, I really need to start more food social media. I haven't created my food account, but I'm in the process of doing more classes like this. So I'm like I have a whole bunch of recipes that I like have in my arsenal, and I'm so ready to like bring out a whole line of cooking classes. But yeah, so these are the Apfel Kuechel, the final product. Ta-da! So cinnamon, sugar, apples. I'm gonna try one before the dinner's ready. Dessert first.
Okay, a random question. Could you do that with banana slices?
Hmm. You
Or like
could-
any other starchy kind of hard. I'm trying to think of other.
Yeah, you could totally do it with bananas. I would make sure you have like really ripe bananas, because the more ripe they are, the better they cook. And what are some other things? Pears would be really nice. Maybe.
What about
This
like
feels like
what about a peach or a nectarine? Like, is that too sweet?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they would all work. A peach, if you're able to cut it in the same shape, it might get a little too wet. Like it might not be able to crisp up. Like the nice thing about this right here is there's almost like a crispy outer edge that like kind of just sticks right next to the pancake. And if you were to get something like that, it might be too juicy. If you do have peaches, perhaps you could do it with peaches that aren't like too ripe. Because if you cook an underripe peach, it'll bring out some of that sweetness. So if you do it with that, I would choose a peach that's not too soft, maybe a little bit more firm. And the same applies for any stone fruit. So peaches, nectarines, apricots, like you could probably do the same exact thing as long as they don't squish in your hands, as long as they have like a bite to them. But yeah, do you want to taste one? I'm gonna give one of the apple pancakes to Brad, my sous chef. So let's see, taste test. Brad, wait.
Oh my God, let's do a live taste test.
Live taste test. That's the one I did. You can have it. Okay. Unbiased opinion, Brad. What do you think? Yay!
Well, I grew up in Lincolnton, North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
We had an apple festival every year. So my church did apple turnovers.
Oh,
It's not
okay.
exactly like that, but it,
Whoa.
nostalgia is like that.
Oh, cool.
Oh, good.
Thumbs up, everybody. Brad approved. Okay, cool. Well, I think my chicken is almost there. I'm just gonna taste it. Let's see. So as you can see, this is pretty much at a point where I'm happy with it. I like how I like how the sauce has come down a good amount. It's at the very beginning, the sauce was like all the way up, and now it's halfway down. If you like a thicker sauce, at that point, you could add a little bit of flour, like the tiniest amount, or a little bit of butter. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of flour, just to finish it off. This is like the leftover flour from the Apfel Kuechel. But like when I say a little bit of flour, I mean a little bit of flour. So like here's my tablespoon, and it's not even a full spoon. Like it's like the tiniest bit. So just coated ever so slightly. And I'm just gonna mix that very vigorously in the middle. If you just plop it in, it might brown. Excuse me, not brown, clump. But already immediately that's making the sauce come together. And I'm happy with that. I really like that. So at this point, it's pretty much done. What I'm gonna do is I will just finish it off with a little bit of parsley. So this is just chopped parsley. Just finish it off like that. And there we go. Ta-da! That's our dish. So braised chicken with mustard, white wine, chicken broth, and parsley. And Apfel Kuechel with cinnamon sugar and local apples. Ta-da! That's our dinner, everybody. That's it from my end. I'm happy to stick around for longer. Like, I'm happy to do cook-alongs. I'm happy to like be here with y'all as you finish your dishes. And yeah, if y'all have any like other questions, if anybody's like, oh my gosh, like I tried to make this dish and I just like, I forgot what he said here, or I forgot like this component, or like it just doesn't look right, reach out to me on the Slack channel. I'll happily like get back to y'all. This is fun. This is what I like to do. But with that, I'm going to turn off my second camera, and I will. I'm going to thank all of you for coming. I'm going to do one final close-up of the dishes, just so we can see them. So, here's, oh gosh, I shouldn't spill it. Here's the final product, braised chicken, which I said earlier, and then also our apple pancakes.
Hey, yourself, let's give a round of applause for Dennis.
Thank you so much. This is so therapeutic.
Of course, yeah. Happy to play around. I'm gonna start cleaning up, but I'll be here. I'm listening.
Wow, I didn't know there's so much response to cooking.
Grub
see it?
looks nice too.
Oh.
Ooh.
Smells good.
For those of you that aren't cooking, did y'all order in tonight? How are you not hungry? I'm so hungry.
I grabbed a sandwich beforehand.
Oh, nice.
So I'm eating that right now.
I was cooking my own thing while you were cooking.
Oh, cool.
Garab, can I see yours?
Yep. Give me a second.
I mean, no rush when it's the right time, you know? Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh, it's
Nice.
so good.
Are you having it with a starch of some kind?
No, that's it.
Okay, cool.
Can we see yours, David?
Yeah, well, so mine is still on the stove, but I'll plate it right there so you can see what it looks like with brown rice and everything.
Anyone else have any other questions for Dennis?
Do you always take 2 hours to cook?
Do I always take 2 hours to cook? Did we just take 2 hours? Was that a whole 2 hours?
An hour and a half.
No, like I would say a lot of my dishes, oftentimes when I'm not walking everybody through the process, it's a lot quicker. You know, I just caught up in talking so much. But I would say this dish like would probably take me 45 minutes max to cook. But on an average night, I would probably I try to spend like, I don't know, 30 minutes cooking. But usually I don't make like dessert and I don't make myself like a fancy cocktail. I might just make this chicken dish on like a Sunday and then keep it for a couple days because it lasts really well, you know?
What are some other dishes that you recommend that last well over multiple days? Or like you mentioned, it gets better the next day. Like what are some other examples and why?
So anything that cooks in liquid like this, like any protein that's braised. So any of the dishes that I highlighted, like adobo, like stews, like curries, I don't know. In France, they do a dish called coq au vin, ropa vieja. So like anything that's braised lasts really well. Starches don't, I mean, it depends which ones. Pastas don't last very well. Purees do, like mashed potatoes or mashed sweet potatoes. Those last really nicely. What are some other things that are A nice make-ahead thing that you could make is not necessarily lasagna, but you could take that concept and apply it to a lot of different things. Like, for example, I like to make a vegetarian version that's just a bunch of stacked like butternut squash. And in between the butternut squash, I add like mushrooms and sometimes cheese if I took my lactate that day. But I think like casserole lasagna families are nice to bring to things because you could kind of just already have it prepared and in the pan, like, and it like stays warm for a long time.
Got it. Anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next conversational section. Nope. And Dennis, you should join us for our conversation section. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I will. I'm gonna mute myself because I'm gonna start cleaning up, but I'll turn on my microphone whenever I want. I'm gonna talk.
Cool. And so.
Yeah, I'll just what I got going. It's on combination of brown and wild rice, and I added mushrooms and cabbage.
Oh, you plated it so nicely.
It looks great.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis.
Amazing.
All right, another thanks to Dennis. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for having me. This was super fun.
Cool. Thank you. So before we start the conversation section, actually, I wanted to give myself a little plug on something that I made. While I'm in Rio, I made some conversation coasters, wooden laser cut coasters. So if you recall, many of you came out to my event last year in person, and I had those wooden laser cut conversation topics on the table. So I decided to actually make them into coasters and like from a manufacturer here in Brazil. And so it's like coated nicely and cut in a more professional way, and that I'm gonna sell them finally, because a lot of people ask me if I'm selling them, and I decided like I'm gonna give it a try and see how this goes. So I'm gonna present my screen real quick to show you some images. So if anyone is interested in them, let me know. It'll be a nice little gift for the new year. It won't make it by Christmas, but for the next year, it's still something I think nice to have, as it encourages conversation. So do you guys see my screen? So they're custom handmade conversation coasters. The images I have is kind of shitty. I have them with me, but in a different city. So like I totally forgot to bring them with me when I fly, but these are the cards that I have them in square and hexagon. And the conversations goes from the lighthearted with one question mark all the way to the more question mark, means the deeper red version of it on coaster style. And selling it for $22 for a pack of 4 or $40 for a pack of 8. And then the special promotion I have right now is that you can customize any question you want to have, and that offer won't be available later once I mass produce. So just that's all I wanted to share. If you have any questions, Slack me.
That's cool.
I'm so happy this finally came along.
Almost feels like a board game, like in itself.
Thank you. So now, and I'm gonna actually real quickly. So this is a link to pre-order my cards. And then this is a link with the Notion doc for the questions for the next, right now, the little happy hour that we have as we sort of reflect upon the year. So does everyone see the questions?
Yeah.
So the topic for today is it's holiday themed, as you can see. There are several categories. There is a holiday spirit and gifts and generosity and giving in terms of gift giving. And the next section is Happy New Year, things that we learned this year. And it's been a really different year this year. And then so I'm curious, like I like questions like, oh, which month of this year is the most challenging? Because I think we all kind of go through different transitions as the month go by. Like despite everything being the same, I think ourselves are different. So I thought these are interesting to know. And lastly, on gratitude, because despite everything that has happened, there's a lot that we can be thankful for still, always. So these are the things that I just kind of all threw them there. And as usual, I'll split everyone into small groups of 3 to 4 so we can kind of chat about it for 20 minutes or so. And then whoever wants to stay on can continue on, and then just kind of free flowing. There's not really an end time for this event. So whoever wants to stay on, well, you can just like keep talking or drop off. No pressure to stay till a certain time. Yeah. Any questions, thoughts, comments while we still have everyone here?
Will we be having a contact list after this? I know David has been asking this, so I wanted to also ask if you have any plan.
What kind of information would be helpful to have on there?
We were thinking about having people's phone number, maybe something like a WhatsApp group or a text group, something like that. If people feel comfortable, if they want to.
Yeah, my feeling was that it should be opt-in. I guess one question that I have, Coco, is do we have 100% participation on the Slack? Or what number of the 33 of us, how many people actually joined the Slack?
Let me check. I don't actually know how I can check. Like, how do I know who actually?
It's on the top right of each channel.
Because
yeah, so probably the general channel would be like the best.
There are 43 people there.
See how many people are there.
The other thing is, I think you actually have access to like Slack analytics, so you can actually see how many people are active on Slack.
Oh, I didn't know that. But is that a feature that's accessible?
I guess the idea is it'd be great if, well, I guess I'd love to hear, maybe now when there are a lot of people here, do you have a vision, Coco, for what happens to us after the last small group conversation on Tuesday?
So the thought that I have is to continue, or the ideal scenario is to continue to onboard more cohorts. So then, so that more people like on a regular basis will be onboarded into the Slack group, like on a cohort to cohort basis. So then there is a way to reach out to more people as more people come in. But I'm also not sure how realistic, or I guess I'm not sure where to find more people to join. I think that's the kind of the what I'm trying to figure out is so when the next cohort joins is contingent on when enough people will sign up again. And I guess also I'm also thinking of different things. Like there's like one survey question on the feedback form on like what's a community that you wish exists. And so that's in a way, like I'm wondering if the next cohort would be more of a theme, like very specific theme based versus this one is more conversational, like general, just deep conversations. Whereas like, could it be like one specific community, and would that bring people closer together? So these are the thoughts that I have. I haven't really finalized them, which is why I wanted to use the survey to sort of see and gauge what makes the most sense. But also curious to hear like what's the ideal version, or like what's something you guys are thinking on how this could go.
I wanted to add something. My understanding of David's question is what happens to the group, what happens to the people who are presently in the group. So sure, new cohorts and stuff, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that the question, David?
It was, but I think Coco has somewhat answered it. I think what Coco's saying is the Slack will continue to be the central gathering point, and that she intends to build a multi-cohort community over time that we will be, we're the first members of. I don't think that's incompatible. I mean, she's not saying we should do nothing until the second cohort magically appears. I think the implication is we can do whatever we want in some kind of self-organizing way until then. But Coco, tell me if I'm correctly interpreting you.
That's accurate. So the way I kind of envision is the community events, like, so you know how a lot of you guys have been helping to host events. So that as a habit, I think anyone is empowered to host anything that they want to for the community. And then to just say, oh, like I want to do this, and then can we throw it on the calendar? And I can also throw it on the meetup calendar. Now that the cohort is not active running, like it's up to you guys on if you wanted to keep it for this cohort, or do you want to make it more of an open event? Because we do have a meetup, like larger group for more people. So you're encouraged to host anything, and I can put it on the calendar as need be. Yeah, and I guess in terms of specifically to Gaurav's, your question of what happens to this cohort, I think more of a general, like, I think that, like, I see cohort as more of a, oh, this is like an opportunity for everyone to get to know each other during like a period of time, versus like if we were to spread this time over, say, a year, then the chance of everyone bumping into each other will be a lot less. I think that was my goal for having this specific cohort. And afterwards, like I know some of you guys are collaborating with each other on certain projects. And I think the group chat idea to make the group feel even smaller for those who are like really active or who wants to like have a more of an active communication. I think that's a good idea for those who want to opt in. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I think, Olivia, what we should probably propose later is a way for people to first opt in on Slack, and then maybe Coco can agree to send an email to the others to invite them to whatever mechanism we're thinking about to keep our cohort tight and communicating.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think Slack is a good channel as long as people continue to be active. But I think Slack would send people email as long as they receive the message, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, we can encourage people to set up their notifications in a particular way.
Yeah, I'm going to send like a final email to the cohort, and then so before I do that, I'll check with you guys on this specific piece, and I'll add it in there. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Cool, thank you, everyone. And let's start just a happy hour, like end of the official like stuff. So now just happy hour.